Okay, so in this concept, we're going to talk about converting between fractions, decimals, and percent. Now, a percent is a ratio that compares a number to the number 100. Now, why 100? Well, we've grown accustomed to using 100 as, a benchmark to measure things, right? You get your grades out of 100, you measure progress on a project or something like that out of 100, in terms of 100%, 50%, 60%, 70%. So, it's become something that we just use without thinking. And hence, this is where the concept of the percentage comes from. So a percent is essentially a part of a whole identified as a product of, or a multiple of 100. Now, converting from percent to fractions involves changing the given percent to taking the value out of the percent, right? The value, the number in the percent, and then dividing that number by 100 while removing the percent sign, right? So you have something with a percent sign, you remove the percent sign, you take the number, let's say we're 30% or something, and then you divide the number by 100, and then you can simplify that as the fraction while having removed the percent sign. Okay, let's look at some examples of this. So again, 30%, like I just mentioned, you would remove the percent sign and then divide 30 by 100, which again, you can simplify this by, removing the like zeros, right? So you end up with 3 divided by 10. So 30% is expressed as a fraction is 3 divided by 10. 0.6%. So again, just remove the percent sign, take the 0.6, write it out of 100. So 0.6 divided by 100, well, how do we simplify this? Well, you don't want to have like a decimal as part of a fraction, right? It's not incorrect, but obviously we would like to simplify it. And the way to simplify it is to convert this decimal to an integer. So how can we get from 0.6 to an integer? What is the nearest integer we can get to from 0.6? Well, if we multiply 0.6 by 10, right, times 10, we end up with 6, right? But to keep the ratio of the fraction the same, I have to also multiply the denominator by 10. So this 100 divided by 10, right, gives me 1,000. So 0.6% is equal to 6 over 1,000, which can be simplified further. So divided by 2, 6 divided by 2 is 3. 1,000 divided by 2 is 500. So ultimately 0.6% is 3 out of 500. Let's look at some exercises for changing percentages to fractions. Now please pause the video, work on these, and come back for the solutions. Okay, let's do these together. So 70%, that gives us, again, remove the percent sign, right? And then just take the 70, write it as a numerator out of 100 in the denominator. And this can simplify further by, again, divide top and bottom by 10, right? To get rid of one of the zeros. So you end up with 7/10. Okay. 145%. So again, remove percent sign, write 145 out of 100. But look at that now. The numerator is larger than the denominator. But this is not really an issue, right? Because, well, you can see that both of these are divisible by 5. Okay? A number is divisible by 5 if its units digit is either 0 or 5. So 100 divided by 5 is 20. 145 divided by 5 is 29. And I can simplify this further, right? So 29 divided by 20 is 1 with a remainder of 9 out of 20, right? This should be, closer like that. Okay, 4%. So remove percent sign. 4 out of 100 gives me, I can simplify this further, so divided by 4, this gives me 1. 100 divided by 4 gives me 25. So this is 1/25, right? 0.25%. So remove percent sign, write it out of 100. Okay, now 0.25. So again, this is again a decimal. So the way to simplify it would be to convert it to the nearest integer by multiplying, either by 10 or 100 or etc. So in this case, we would want to multiply it by 100, right? Because the decimal point is here. We need to move it 2 spaces, right? 2 spaces. So 2 spaces means 0.25 times 100. That gives me 25. But to keep the fraction the same, I need to multiply the denominator by 100 also. So 100 times 100 is 10,000. Right? And I can actually simplify this further, because 25 divided by 25 is 1. 10,000 divided by 25 is 400. So I end up with 1/400. Okay, so 0.25% is 1 out of 400. 4.15%. Remove percent sign, write 4.15 out of 100. Simplify further, convert it to the nearest, well, I shouldn't say the nearest integer, but convert it to an integer where you only have to multiply by 10 or 100 or 1000, etc. Something that's a factor of 10. So 4.15, again, you need to move the decimal point by 2 slots. So in this case, we need to multiply by 100, which gives us 415. Okay, an integer. Now, we need to do the same thing to the denominator, right? So 100 times 100 is 10,000. And this can simplify further, right? So these are both divisible by 5, right? So 415 divided by 5 is 83. 10,000 divided by 5 is 2,000. Okay, this is the final answer. Now, the next phase of these conversions is converting a fraction to a percent. Now, the way to do that is dividing the fraction, so you can do long division, and then multiplying the quotient of the fraction by 100 and adding the percent sign, or moving the decimal point 2 places to the right and adding the percent sign. And now you have a percent, okay, from a fraction. So you go from fraction, right, fraction to decimal to percent. Okay, now let's look at an example. So convert 2/8 to percent. Now, like I was saying, so you would have to do division, in this case, long division of 2 divided by 8. To do that, I have to have the decimal point, and I have to have the decimal zeros, again, so I can keep my decimal positions and such. In this case, the way to do this would be to divide every digit out of the dividend, which is 2, by the divisor, which is 8, and then try to determine the remainders. Okay, so 2 divided by 8, and the way to think of this is how many full 8s are contained within 1/2, right? Well, 1/2 does not have any full 8s, right? Because 2 doesn't have any 8s in it. 8 has 4 2s in it, but 2 does not have any 8s in it. So the first digit in my quotient is going to be 0, right? Because 2 does not contain any 8s in it, right? So I just did 2 divided by 8, and I got 0. For the decimal point, I'm just going to move it just as is, right? Just the way it is, moves up. So 0 point, and then I'm going to move to the next digit in my dividend. So I have the 0, but I'm not just going to do 0 divided by 8, right? I need to do the 2 and the 0, and assume that this point, the decimal point is up there. So now it is as if I have 20. Okay, so I have 20 divided by 8. Now how many full 8s are contained in 20? Well, there's 2 full 8s, and then there's a remainder of 4 out of 20, right? So I need this number, I need 2. So 20 divided by 8 is 2, right? And then I do 2 times 8 to get this number. Because, so this is the process, you just have to keep reiterating this process until you finish all the digits in your dividend. So 2 times 8 is 16. Now I want to subtract 16 from 20 to get the remainder. So the remainder is 4, right? But I still have another 0. Why did I add the 2 zeros? I mean, initially I had just 2 over 8, right? Not 2.00 over 8. Well, I'm adding 2 zeros because I'm trying to convert it to a percent. So I'm trying to get a decimal that has two digits, okay? So so now I have 20 minus 16, and that gives me 4, and then I drop this 0 down there, and now I have 40. So I need to divide this 40 by the 8, right? And that gives me 5. Right? 40 divided by 8 is 5. And then I do the same thing again. 5 times 8, right, is also 40, which in this case is a remainder of 0, meaning I am done with my division operation. And my result is 0.25. Okay? So 2 divided by 8 is 0.25. Now that I have a fraction of 0.25, I'm going to take it and I'm going to move the decimal point 2 places to the right. So from here, the decimal is going to do 1, and then it's going to do 2, right? So this is going to be 25 point, you could say 0.0, or you could just leave it at 25, right? And then add the percent sign. So 25% or 25.0%. Okay, all this is the same. All right, so 2/8, the fraction, is equivalent to 25%. 2 out of 8 is 25%. Now we have some exercises for converting fractions to percent. Please pause the video, work on these, and come back for the solutions. Okay, so we have 4/5. And the way to set it up is, like we were just discussing, set up a long division. Okay, 4. Yeah, this is 0. It is not 6, right? So 4.00 divided by 5, right? So 4 divided by 5 is 0, right? Because there are no full 5s contained within a 4. Okay, so it's 0, and then move the point up as is, and then do the next digit with the first digit. So 4 and 0 is 40, so 40 divided by 5 gives me 8. Okay, but then I'll do 8 times 5, which is going to give me 40. And then I'm going to subtract this from this. 40 minus 40 is 0. I can drop this remaining 0, but I have all zeros anyway, right? So 0 times 5 is 0. So this is the answer, 0.8 or 0.80. So I have 0.8 or 0.80, and I want to convert that to a percent. So again, move the decimal point 2 spots or 2 slots to the right, or 2 spaces to the right, and you end up with 80% or 80.0%, etc. Okay, both the same. Okay, 24 over 12. Now, if you look a little closer at this, you'll see that 24 divided by 12 is actually equal to 2. So it would be nice to simplify it from the very beginning before you start doing long division. You know, I mean, if you recognize that there's something else you could do to simplify it right away, that's what you want to be doing. So 24 divided by 12 is 2. And now I have 2, and I want to convert that to a percent, right? So I can say 2.00, because again, when we're dealing with percent, you're typically moving 2 spaces. You're moving the decimal point by 2 spaces. So if you don't have the point, you know, and then decimals, you want to, you want to actually write it out. So 2.00 becomes, I want to move this 2 spaces to the right, the decimal point I mean. So now I'm going to have 200 and then add the percent sign. Right? 40 divided by 50. Now this is actually very familiar. This is very similar to exercise 1 right here, right? Except it is not simplified. But if you do simplify, it ends up being the same thing. So 40, you can divide, the numerator and denominator by 10, right? Divided by 10 divided by 10 is going to give me 4/5, right? Which, again, we did up here, right, is equal to 80%. Okay? 1 2/5. So that is actually equal to, so 5 times 1 is 5, plus 2 is 7 out of 5. So now I've converted from a mixed number to an improper fraction. Okay, 7/5. Now I'm going to take the 7/5, right, 7, 5, 7.00, and just do some long division. Okay, let me actually write this a little higher because I don't want it to act up. So, right, 7.005. Okay. So 7 divided by 5. How many full 5s are contained within a 7? Well, we have 1 full 5, and then there's a remainder, right? But we'll get to it. But there's 1 full 5 in a 7. And then we multiply this result by 5 to get 5. Okay? Let me write it under the 7 here to get 5. And then I can do 7 minus 5 is 2, right? And then I can drop this 0, 20. So 20 divided by 5 is, and then obviously after I did 7 divided by 5, the decimal point just moves up as is. Now I have 20 divided by 5 gives me 4, right? And then 4 divided by 5 gives me 20. and then if I subtract, I end up with 0. And even if I drop this last 0, right, I'm already at 0, so I mean I'm pretty much done. So this is my result. So my result is 1.4, but I'm going to say 40 because again with percentages I'm typically going to have to move the decimal point by 2 spaces. Okay, so you typically want to have at least two decimal digits. So 1.40 converts to a percentage by moving the decimal point 2 spaces to the right. And that's going to give me 140%. Okay. 12 3/4. Now there's actually a pretty easy way to simplify this number before attempting to convert it to a percentage. So 3/4 is what? 3/4 is 0.75, right? So this is the same as 12.75. Now how does that convert to a percentage? Well, again, very straightforward at this point, right? You just move the decimal point 2 slots or 2 spaces to the right. So you end up with 1,275%. Okay? So hopefully that was clear. Now the next subconcept in these conversions is converting a percent to a decimal. Now the gist of it is to divide the fraction by 100 and then remove the percent sign or move the decimal point 2 places to the left. Okay, so let's look at some of the examples. You take the percent, the number that's written in percentage, right, and then take the actual number, remove the percent sign, right? When you take the number, you write it out of 100. So in this case, the number is 45. So we wrote 45 divided by 100. And then just convert this fraction to a decimal, just as you normally would, right? Or you take the number, so in this case it's 45%, right? So get rid of the percent sign, take the number 45.0, right? And move the dot 2 places to the left. Now you're trying to go from a percentage to a decimal. When trying to go from a decimal to a percentage, you move 2 places to the right. When going from a percent to a decimal, you move 2 places to the left. So you end up with 0.45, right? So that's essentially a decimal. So you need a 0 before the point. So 0.45, right? So 45 out of 100, 45 100ths is 0.45. Or 45% is 0.45 as a decimal. 0.12%. Again, the most straightforward way is to move the decimal point 2 places to the left, right? So we have 0.12. If I move the decimal point 2 places to the left, I get 0 and 0, and then the decimal point, right? So I get the decimal point and then 0, 0, 1, 2, but I need a 0 before the decimal point because that is, how a decimal should be written. So my final answer is 0.0012. Okay? So again, pause the video for these exercises, work on them, and come back for the solutions. Okay, now the goal here is to change the following percentage values to decimals. So now we have 42%. And again, like I mentioned, the most straightforward way to do this is to move the decimal point to the left if you're trying to convert to a decimal. So that gives me, 42.0, right? Move the decimal to the left, so you end up with 0.42, 0.42, and the percentage sign gets discarded. Okay, 5%. So 5.0, percentage sign gets discarded, and this this becomes, right, so 0, right, so 0.5 decimal point and then 0, so 0.05, that's 5%. 4.7%, again, move the decimal point to the left, right, so that is equivalent to 0.47, the decimal point, and 0, and the percentage sign gets discarded. 15%. So 15.0, 1, 2, right? So 0.15. 21%. 21.0, 1, 2, 0.21. Okay? The next subconcept here is converting a decimal to a percent. So we kind of went through this when converting from a fraction to a percent, right? The quickest way, or the shortest way from a fraction, or the shortest way to get from a fraction to a percent is to go through a decimal, right? So convert the fraction to a decimal and then convert the decimal to a percent. So here we're just taking that last bit, or that last section of that whole sequence. So namely going from a decimal to a percent directly. So the way to do that is, again, we've done this multiple times up to this point. So move the decimal point 2 places to the right. So when trying to go to a percent, you move the decimal point to the right. Or multiply the number by 100. So you take the decimal, multiply it by 100, and add the percent symbol at the end of the number. Let's look at some examples. So convert 0.25 to a percent. The quick way is to, again, move the decimal point 2 places to the right, and that gives you 25, you can say 0.0 if you want, percent, or just 25%, right? And then we just write, we've written the percent symbol. 3.12. So again, that could be written as 312, and then just add the percent sign, right? So 3.12 and percent is 312%. Now, the last round of exercises for this concept. Please pause the video, work on these, and come back for the solutions. Okay, so converting the following decimals to percent. This is going to be very quick, right? So 0.54, again, converting to a percent involves moving the decimal point to the right, 2 places to the right. So 0.54 is 54%, right? 1.25 is 125%. Okay. 0.30 is 30%. 0.752 is 2, so it's 75.2%. Okay. 5.542, you move it 2, so it's 554.2. Okay. Now, this is a quick summarization of some common fractions, decimals, and percents. Okay, percent values. So, in fraction form, when you have 1/4, right, that's a quarter. A quarter is, being a decimal, is 0.25. Okay, we all know that. In terms of a percent, it is 25%. So a quarter is 25%. A half is 0.5 or 0.50, which is 50%. 3/4, you've come across this one, right, is just 0.75 or 75%. 4/4, or a whole 1, right, is 1, written as a decimal, or 100% written as a percent. 1/3 is 0.33333, etc., or 1/3 of 100%, which is 33 1/3%. Right? 2/3 is 0.66. It's just 2 times this, right? It's this times 2 gives you this, right? Or this times 2 gives you this. Right? 1/5 is 0.2 or 20%. So a quarter is 25%. A fifth is 20%. 2/5 is just 2 times the 1/5, right? Which is 2 times the 20%, giving me 40%. Or 2 times 0.2, giving me 0.4. 3/5 is 0.6 or 60%. 4/5 is 0.8 or 80%. 1/10 is 0.1 or 10%. 3/10, for example, is 0.3 or 30%. How about 6/10, right? 6/10 would have been 0.6 or 60%. Okay, so hopefully this was clear. This is it for this concept. See you in the next video.